She promised to marry him at 13. Now she's back at 19, and she's not a little girl anymore. The lights on Orbital Exchange, Hub H91, flickered like they were debating whether to go out for good. Stephen didn't look up. He was too busy coaxing warmth from his synth coffee, which tasted like algae boiled in grief. Terminal 14. A pulsed quietly at the edge of his vision, reminding him for the third time that Form 72C was still unverified. He let it blink. That was his rhythm now. Quiet deferrals. Bureaucratic stasis. The kind of life where you measured days by how many appeals you could ignore without getting flagged. Then the outer doors hissed open, and for the first time in weeks the air changed. Footsteps. Not the usual shuffle of lost vendors or nervous permit holders, but long, deliberate strides. The kind that didn't question direction, the kind that came with intent. Stephen didn't turn around. He didn't have to. The hair on his arms stood on end. His instincts, once sharp, now dulled by 1,000 forms and quiet loneliness, flickered to life. A voice, calm and commanding, sliced through the room. "This is him." He turned slowly. 2 station guards flanked a woman who stood half a head taller than them. Her skin shimmered with a rich violet hue beneath the flickering overheads. Long black hair framed a face he couldn't quite match to any file, but his body remembered her before his mind did. She wore a travel-worn jumpsuit streaked with engine dust and patchwork repairs. A small duffel bag hung at her side, the kind scavengers used to carry everything they owned. Her hands clutched a blinking data chip, but what held his attention were her eyes. Dark, intense, utterly focused on him. "6 years ago," she said, her voice carrying the authority of an oath, "you promised to become my future mate. I was 13 then. I am 19 now. I have returned to fulfill the bond." The room stilled. The guards glanced at each other. A service drone hovered uncertainly in the air, confused by the silence. Stephen blinked. His terminal went idle. He remembered. She'd been a girl then, terrified, alone, and misplaced by a broken identity scan. She'd collapsed in the hallway outside his office, shivering in an emergency blanket 3 sizes too big. He'd brought her food, gotten her into the system. When she asked if she'd have to be sent off station, he joked, "Not if I file you as a future spouse. Bonded parties can't be deported without mutual revocation." He never expected her to believe him. She hadn't forgotten a single word. "Wait," Stephen said, standing slowly. "Sahari?" She gave the smallest nod. "That was a joke," he said carefully. "A workaround to get you temporary housing. I never thought—" Her voice didn't waver, but her hand twitched before she set the data chip on his desk. "Denvari do not joke about bonding vows. You knew that when you signed. I knew you were scared and needed a place to sleep. I didn't think you'd come back 6 years later with a formal declaration. I said I would return." Her expression flickered just for a breath. "I saved every coin. I followed your trace. You were the only one who ever treated me like I wasn't a commodity." Stephen exhaled slowly. A tightness curled in his chest. Shame, disbelief, and something sharper he didn't want to name yet. "You were 13. I am 19 now." Her eyes did not soften. "And you promised." Behind them, the station AI chimed in brightly. "Unauthorized relationship recognitions may result in a 14-credit penalty and a citation on your civic record." The guards took a careful step back. Stephen ran a hand through his hair and looked around the office. Blinking terminals, drones darting between cubicles, the smell of old recycled air and hot circuitry. And her, standing like she belonged in none of it, but had come anyway. He sighed. "Do you even have a place to stay tonight?" She tilted her head. "Here." "In my quarters?" She nodded. "As tradition allows. I will remain near my intended until intimacy is confirmed." A pause. "I brought my own mat." Stephen closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Fine. One night. No bond initiation. No forms." "I have already submitted Form 77B-17, she said, producing a second chip from her jacket. He didn't even bother to argue. They walked together through the flickering corridors of H91, past half-lit signs and slow-moving cargo drones. She moved like a soldier, graceful, alert, her footsteps precise. She said nothing, but her presence filled every inch of space beside him. When they reached his quarters, he hesitated at the door. There's no extra bed. She knelt, unfolded a compact sleep mat, and laid it out beside the kitchenette. This is sufficient. Stephen watched her for a long moment, then stepped inside. The lamp shaped like a cat clicked on by itself, casting a soft glow over the room. Sahari glanced at it. It watches. It's broken, he said, like everything else here. She sat down on the mat, cross-legged, hands folded, still like a statue. Thank you for keeping your promise, she said softly. Stephen turned away, unsure what to do with that. He brushed his teeth, dimmed the lights, and crawled into bed. From the floor, her quiet breathing anchored the silence. For the first time in a long time, sleep didn't feel like an act of surrender. It felt like the beginning of something real. Stephen woke to the faint scent of warm starch and metal. It took a moment to realize it wasn't just lingering station air or the dull aroma of yesterday's reheated ration tray. It was new, different, almost earthy. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. The familiar shape of his cat lamp blinked from the corner, casting soft light over the room. Sahari was already awake, kneeling on the mat she'd laid out beside the kitchenette. She hadn't moved much in the night. The blanket he draped over her still clung to one shoulder. Now she was chopping something, precisely, methodically, with a small, curved blade he definitely didn't own. Bright purple root slices, thin as skin, landed one by one in a shallow pan heating over a portable coil. Stephen blinked again. Did you bring a stove? She didn't turn. Denvari travel kitchens are compact, efficient. Yours seemed inadequate. He squinted at the pan, then at her. Where did you even get those roots? I grew them. In a grow pod? On your trip? Yes. She glanced back briefly, as if double-checking that he was, in fact, still there. You look disheveled. This is a good sign. Humans sleep better when they are safe. He let out a quiet breath and stood. The floor was cold. He shuffled over to the panel for hot water, ordered a wash cycle, and glanced again at her as the kettle began to whine. You didn't have to cook, he muttered. We've got nutrition packs. I don't bond over paste. She turned off the heat with a flick of her wrist, then slid the pan's contents into a small dish. The root slices shimmered faintly in the low light, steam rising in tight spirals. Eat before you protest further. He hesitated, then sat. The scent was strange but inviting, smoky, tangy, with something like ginger beneath it. He picked up a slice and bit in. The flavor hit like memory. He couldn't place why. It wasn't like anything he'd ever eaten before, but it was warm, real. Sahari studied him in silence, then gave a quiet, approving nod. You didn't sleep much, he said. I do not need much. That's not what I asked. This time her eyes flicked to the floor, just for a moment, then back to his. Your home is small, but it is quiet. I remember quiet. I like it. Stephen felt something shift in his chest again, that same unfamiliar twinge from the night before. He looked down at his hands. I haven't shared breakfast with anyone in a long time, he admitted. You did once, she said softly. 6 years ago. He met her eyes. That wasn't breakfast. That was a ration bar and a vending machine coffee. Her lips curled, just barely. Still counts. He found himself smiling despite the fog in his brain. This wasn't how his mornings went. Usually it was half-warm sludge and a quiet walk to a desk no one cared about. This was something else. They finished eating without speaking. Afterwards, she carefully washed the pan with a self-cleaning sponge and tucked her tools into the bag she'd left by the door. Stephen watched her with a kind of baffled admiration. Every movement she made was exact, intentional, but never robotic. She wasn't performing. She simply didn't waste energy. You really submitted a Form 77B-17? He asked. Yes, last night, before sleeping. He pinched the bridge of his nose. That triggers a review within 72 hours. If we don't rescind, the station will assume we're initiating domestic bonding. I know, she said calmly. I read the form. Sahari! You don't need to decide now. It is only a declaration of intention. He turned toward the door. Right. Intention. I intend to survive the next 72 hours without having a nervous breakdown. She rose, gathering her bag, then followed him. Do you intend to eat again at midday? I can prepare another meal. Stephen paused at the threshold, then glanced at her sidelong. If I survive my inbox, maybe. The corridors of H91 were their usual chaos, overcrowded, undermaintained, and strangely alive. Vendors shouted in 5 different languages. The wall display next to the lift blinked between an ad for oxygen flavoring and a warning about unpaid freight fees. A floor drone skittered past with one wheel bent, dragging a sad arc behind it. Stephen guided them toward Central Permit Services, half hoping no one would notice her. They noticed. Hey, a clerk whispered as they passed. Is that the Form 77B girl? Sahari ignored them. Stephen kept walking. At his desk, he motioned for her to take the spare chair, then remembered he didn't have one. She stood perfectly still as he sat down and pulled up his queue. Forms, appeals, glitches, nothing new. He sighed and began to process the first of the day's petty disasters. Midway through, she leaned over his shoulder. This applicant has entered duplicate permit codes. Denvari Accounting treats this as intentional fraud. He blinked at the screen. She was right. He hadn't even noticed. That's actually helpful. I intend to assist you, she said. Stephen glanced at her. Because you're my intended bondmate? Because I respect your mind. And you work too slowly. For the first time in years, he laughed. Short, startled, but real. They worked together for most of the morning. She learned fast. At one point, she corrected a malfunctioning translator field before Stephen even saw the error. Eventually, he looked up from the console. You don't have to stay here all day. You're not required to sit beside me while I approve food cart licenses. Sahari tilted her head. You are more relaxed when I am near. Your shoulders dropped 6 centimeters since I arrived. He stared. You measured my posture? Denvari bonding involves mutual physical awareness. Stephen rubbed his face. You are terrifying. She didn't smile, but there was something softer in her eyes. You are calming. The moment stretched between them, and then quietly she added, I was afraid you wouldn't remember me. He looked at her, really looked this time. Beneath the iron discipline, beneath the cultural ritual and confident words, she was still that girl. Just older, stronger, and better at hiding fear. I didn't forget, he said. I just didn't think I mattered that much. She touched the edge of his desk, fingers resting lightly against the synth glass. You did. And suddenly the room didn't feel quite so small. It felt like a beginning, a strange one, but maybe not a bad one, and definitely not a joke. Not anymore. Stephen's shift ended later than usual. A broken data conduit in the district permits queue had frozen hundreds of applications, and every clerk with system override clearance, including him, was roped in to help untangle it. By the time he shut down his terminal, his shoulders were aching, his back had fused into the shape of his chair, and his brain felt like it had been stuffed with wet paper. Sahari had waited the entire time. She hadn't hovered or interrupted, but he had felt her presence just behind his desk. A stillness that wasn't passive but poised, like she was guarding something, or someone. Every so often when he glanced over, she would be reviewing Denver trade regulations or cross-referencing station sanitation codes. Not because she had to, because she was learning his world. Now they walked back to his quarters through a corridor that buzzed with flickering light and distant arguments. A vendor cart zipped past, playing a jingle too loud for the hour. Stephen sighed and pressed his thumb to the access panel. The door slid open. His cat lamp blinked at them, like it was just as confused as he felt. Sahari stepped inside, took her boots off at the threshold, and moved with quiet purpose to unpack a small satchel. She unwrapped a long, narrow cloth containing an assortment of silver tools. Not weapons, at least not in the traditional sense, but something in their precision made his skin tighten. She noticed. These are ceremonial, she said, placing them gently on the counter. My mother taught me to carry them when preparing a vow space. Stephen sat on the edge of his bed. Is that what this is to you? A vow space? It's temporary, she said, but sacred still. I wanted to thank you. He frowned. For what? For not revoking the form today. You could have. I thought about it. I know. There was no accusation in her voice, just acknowledgement, honesty, stripped of vanity or hurt. He didn't know how to respond to that. She lit a small glowing bead and dropped it into a bowl of warm water. A subtle scent bloomed into the air, metal and citrus, sharp and clean. I'd like to clean my hands before I cook again, she said. And yours, if you'll allow it. He blinked. Why? It is a Denbury right. Not for hygiene, but clarity. You shared food with me. You invited me into your space. Now I offer a reflection. Stephen hesitated, then stood, walked to her, and held out his hands. Her touch was cool and deliberate, her fingers tracing the lines of his palms with gentle pressure. She dipped a cloth into the aromatic water and moved slowly, like she was committing each movement to memory. He didn't flinch, but something in his chest went very still. Afterward, she dried his hands and stepped back without a word. He looked at her, really looked. The shine of her skin in the low light, the way her dark hair curled slightly at the tips when unbraided. The fatigue in her posture she tried so hard to hide. How long were you alone? He asked. After they left you here. Her shoulders tensed slightly. Just once. 32 hours. The station wouldn't confirm my identity. I couldn't access food or shelter. I tried to sleep in a maintenance corridor. A customs officer tried to detain me. Said I had no legal presence. No proof I existed. Stephen's throat tightened. Why didn't they come back sooner? They thought I was with the secondary caravan. It took a full cycle for the confusion to be corrected. She paused. But by then, I had already bonded to this place. To you. His voice was quiet. I didn't do much. I just got you past the system filters. You saw me, she said, her voice low but firm. Others saw a mistake. You treated me like a person. He lowered himself back onto the edge of the bed, unsure what to say. I wanted to stay, she continued, but my family, Denvari matchings are political, transactional. I was expected to accept a union that would benefit them. When I told them about you, they told me it was childish fantasy, that you were, she hesitated, a footnote, a kind act, nothing more. Stephen's jaw clenched. You ran away? I chose. I saved every currency unit I earned during my training. I arranged passage. I left a note, and I made my way back to the one person who ever gave me dignity without demanding obedience in return. She looked down at her hands, the strong, capable ones that had cleaned his, that had chopped strange roots and fixed his broken air filter this morning. I know it's not the same for you, she added. I'm not asking you to pretend, but I need you to understand why I came, why I stayed. Stephen stood, walked over to the tiny viewport and stared out into the endless swirl of Pili and Four Below. I gave up trying to fix things, he said. I used to fight for people, fought the Corps, the legal boards, every stacked deck I could find. And I lost, over and over, until I started to think that maybe none of it mattered, that maybe I didn't matter. He turned toward her. And then you walked back into my life, asking me to keep a promise I barely remember making. And I thought, this is insane. But part of me was relieved that someone still believed I could matter. Sahari stepped toward him slowly. You do matter. I'm still not the man you remember. You are more, she said. You're the one who kept his word. Even now. They stood there facing each other, the silence between them thicker than the station air. Then, softly, instinctively, she reached out and touched his arm. Not as a ritual, not as a cultural performance, just as a person, bridging a gap. Stephen didn't pull away. I don't know where this is going, he said, but I don't want to send you away. You couldn't, she said quietly, even if you tried. That night she didn't sleep on the mat. She didn't ask to share his bed either. Instead, she pulled a pillow to the space between them and curled up at the edge of the cot, close enough to share warmth, far enough to respect the distance. He turned the cat lamp down low, not off, and when sleep finally came, it didn't feel like retreating. It felt like healing. Stephen woke before the alarm, the quiet hum of the ventilation system brushing against his ears like a soft warning. For a moment, he lay still, uncertain why his breath felt slower, his heartbeat steadier. Then he remembered. Sahari. She was there. Not on the floor this time. Not curled up beside the kitchenette like a house guest too polite to intrude. She was on the narrow cot with him, her side of the mattress barely disturbed, her posture as disciplined as ever, even in sleep. Between them, the pillow she'd placed as a silent boundary remained, though its edges were no longer sharply aligned. One corner had drifted toward him, or maybe he drifted toward it. She was facing him, eyes closed, long black hair spilling across her arm like ink across paper. Her breathing was even, peaceful. Stephen turned carefully and sat on the edge of the bed. His joints ached from sleeping in a space meant for one, but he didn't mind, not really. He stood, stretched, and padded quietly toward the panel to start the day's water cycle. The hiss of heating coils filled the room as steam curled gently into the air. Behind him, he heard the faint shift of fabric. "Your breathing changed," Sahari murmured. Her voice was soft, not groggy. She'd been half awake, listening. Stephen glanced back. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I slept better than I expected." He smiled. "That makes two of us." She sat up, straight-backed, drawing her hair over one shoulder to braid it with practiced hands. "Your sleeping form tensed twice. Night stress?" "Probably," he said. "It's been a while since I shared space with anyone." She tied off the braid. "Denvari warriors sleep in clusters during early bonding. It teaches you to synchronize breath, to reduce fear. We call it forming the breath circle." Stephen turned toward her, arms crossed. "Didn't realize I was part of a breath circle." "You consented to proximity." He raised a brow. "You've got a way of making intimacy sound like tactical deployment." "That's because it is," she said. But there was the faintest smile on her lips. He blinked. "Was that sarcasm?" She stood, stepping close enough that he could see the light shift across the violet of her skin. "Not quite. I'm still learning." He shook his head with a small laugh and turned toward the kitchenette. "Come on, I'll show you how to make actual coffee. The real kind. No powdered root systems involved." "Is it bitter?" "Very. Good." They moved through the morning with an awkward rhythm that began to settle into something resembling domesticity. She cooked while he cleaned. He reviewed messages while she examined the plumbing, commenting on the inefficiency of the water recirculation system. He listened without protest. They didn't talk much, but the silences were no longer uncomfortable. They were filled with movement, with glances, with small actions, handing each other a towel, passing a utensil without asking. By midday, Stephen found himself watching her more than his screen. "You know," he said finally, "I don't think I've ever lived with someone who didn't need things explained to them." "You still explain." He shrugged. "Force of habit." "I don't mind. I like hearing you talk." That stopped him for a second. Not because of the words themselves, but the way she said them. Plain, honest, without weight or flirtation. It made them land harder. He looked away, feigning interest in the floating task list. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "I hope that is not a complaint." "It's not." He hesitated. "It's kind of the problem." She turned toward him. "You're afraid of where this goes." "I'm afraid of what I'll do to it." Silence again. But this time it was heavier. Sahari stepped forward, close enough that he felt her warmth. "When I was 14, she said quietly, I was assigned a mentor, a Denvari archivist. She was kind, patient. She taught me how to make decisions slowly, how to survive in a system that doesn't wait for grief. When I told her I wanted to return here, she didn't laugh. She helped me find transport. She told me that any bond worth honoring would wait to be tested." Stephen turned to her. Her eyes were steady. "I didn't come to claim a prize," she said. "I came to find out if the man who helped me still existed." "You do, and you're more than I expected." He swallowed. "I still don't know what this is." "You don't have to. I'll know when you're ready." For the first time he reached for her. Not her hand, not a full embrace, just a gentle, grounding touch on her shoulder. She didn't flinch, but she did shift slightly toward him, just enough to say, "I see you. I'm here." Later they walked together through Sector 5, where the vendor courts buzzed with midday traffic. She asked to try human noodles. He watched her struggle with the chopsticks, then fail with dignity. Back at the flat, he handed her a toolkit to help fix the failing thermal valve. She worked in silence while he sipped lukewarm coffee and pretended not to watch her every movement. That night, she didn't use the pillow. She curled beside him, close but not pressing. Her fingers brushed his once. He didn't pull away. Neither of them spoke. But long after the lights dimmed, Stephen reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. She didn't move. And in the hush of orbital hub H91, two people finally exhaled together. Not as strangers, not as rescuers and rescued, but as something real, something neither of them had a name for. Yet. The notice arrived mid-morning, slipped quietly into Stephen's work inbox with the low-priority flag blinking in soft yellow. Mandatory cohabitation verification, Form 77B-17, trigger response. Please report to interview room 6C within 12 hours. Stephen stared at the message, reread it twice, and then let his forehead fall gently against his desk. From across the workspace, Sahari leaned over. You've received news, he grunted. We triggered the system, that bonding declaration you filed. It set off the automated review protocol. Sahari looked unfazed. As expected. No, he said, pushing back from the desk. Not as expected. This is a formal interview, a joint assessment, which means some poor underpaid analyst is going to ask us deeply personal questions while a bot watches our body language and calculates compatibility ratios. She tilted her head. And, Stephen blinked. Sahari, we've been sharing a cot for 2 nights. We're barely figuring out who uses which mug. She stood. Then we will explain our bond honestly. That's the problem, he muttered. They arrived at interview room 6C just before the hour mark. The room was windowless, overly white, and filled with the soft buzz of stale recirculated air. A table sat in the center, 2 chairs on either side. A friendly-looking AI drone hovered near the ceiling, its optical lens blinking in blue. Please state your names, it said in a smooth, pleasant voice. Stephen Hale, he sighed. Sahari Vel, she said with quiet conviction. Initiating Form 77, B-17, compatibility interview. Please respond naturally and honestly. Behavioral scans will proceed in parallel. Begin. A panel lit up on the wall behind them, displaying the first question. Why did you choose to live together? Stephen opened his mouth, then hesitated. Sahari didn't. He offered me shelter when I had none. He gave me respect without condition. I returned because I remembered who I was when I was near him. Stephen blinked at her. The AI logged her words with a soft chime. He cleared his throat. I didn't think it was real. When she showed up again, I thought it was a mistake. But she made me feel like maybe the man who made that promise still existed. Describe a recent moment of trust between you. This time, Stephen spoke first. She shared her sleep space. It might not seem like much, but I know it meant something to her. She let herself rest beside me. Sahari nodded. He took my hand, not to claim, but to comfort. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Have you discussed your future together? The question hit like a stone. Silence. Then Sahari. No, because he is still deciding if he believes he has one. Stephen flinched slightly, not from offense, but because it was true. Brutally, beautifully true. I didn't expect you to fight for me like that, he said quietly. I didn't come to be fought for, she replied. I came to fight with you. The panel blinked again. Final question. Do you believe this bond is genuine? Sahari turned to him, not to the panel. I do. Stephen met her eyes, and for the first time, he didn't hesitate. I don't know what to call it yet, he said. But yes, it's real. The AI beeped. Compatibility, 91.2%. Satisfactory, cohabitation approved. No further verification required. The light dimmed. The doors opened. The interview was over. They walked in silence back through the corridors of H91, past vending machines and flickering signs. The station was the same, but something between them had shifted. Stephen glanced sideways. You really believe we're that compatible? Only 91%, she said dryly. We'll have to work on that. He laughed, soft and genuine. She didn't smile, but her fingers brushed his as they walked. This time he held on. not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. No, she answered. It never was. He reached for her hand, and this time she met him halfway. Her fingers slid against his, not with the stiffness of ritual, not with calculation, but with warmth. I don't know what this is becoming, he said, voice low, but I know I don't want to go back to who I was before you. Sahari's other hand came up gently to touch the side of his face, her palm cool, thumb brushing against the corner of his mouth. You're not who you were, she whispered. You're more. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't a declaration or a rite. It was the collision of two people who'd risked breath, bone, and blood, who'd carried fear in silence, and now stood facing one another with nothing left to hide. When their lips met, it wasn't hesitant. It was grounding. And when they broke apart, foreheads resting together, she whispered into the space between them, I don't need a ceremony to know I'm yours. He answered with nothing but a nod, his hand tightening gently around hers. And that night, when they slept, no pillow between them, no distance held, they didn't just breathe together, they belonged. The hum of the station was low and lazy, like it too had settled into the quiet. Artificial dusk cast long golden lines through the apartment's viewport, staining the metal panels with warmth. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just full. Stephen stood at the kitchen counter, slowly drying his hands. He could feel her behind him, still seated on the floor cushions, her posture straight, but her presence uncertain. She broke the silence, not with words at first, but with the faint rustle of her robes as she adjusted her legs beneath her. Then, when Denvery love, she said softly, we tell no one for 7 days. Stephen turned, brow lifting. 7? She nodded, eyes steady on his. We wait to see if it burns away. Denvari emotion is intense, sharp. We believe if it's real, it remains. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed but expression open. Has it remained? Sahari hesitated, then nodded once. Longer than 7 days. Longer than 7 years. That answer sent something tight through his chest. Not surprise, not pressure, just awe. The kind of reverence you feel when you realize you've been carrying something fragile and holy without knowing it. She continued, voice low. My people, when they marry, we do not say vows. We plant them in soil. Each pair offers a small seed, usually something humble. Root fruit, sometimes a vine. We place them in the same pot. If they grow together, the union is approved. Stephen's lips parted slightly. What if they don't? Then the bond was not aligned. It does not shame either person. We simply try again, with others. Her fingers grazed her own wrist, thoughtful. But it rarely fails when there is trust. A beat of silence passed. The station lights shifted from gold to soft blue. Nightlight settings. He moved to sit beside her, crossing his legs, close enough for his knee to touch hers. I don't have a garden, he said, but I've got a closet full of paperwork. We could file Form 117-C if you wanted. It's the official. I already filled it out, she said, not embarrassed at all. 3 weeks ago. Stephen blinked. I was waiting, she added, to see if you would burn away. A laugh escaped him, quiet and disbelieving. He shook his head, reaching for her hand. Her fingers didn't flinch this time. You knew, he said, voice thick. I hoped. They sat like that for a moment, palms pressed, knees touching, two people from two species, breathing the same still air. Sahari tilted her head slightly, her voice quieter now. I do not have soil here, Stephen. I have only memory. But if I could, if I had land, roots, a sky, I would plant something for us. And I would wait, as our elders did, for the green to rise. He looked at her, really looked. The curve of her jaw, the quiet determination in her violet eyes, the way she never apologized for wanting something with her whole being. Something flickered in his own chest, too long dormant, a warmth that had nothing to do with logic or safety or survival. I don't need a garden, he said finally. I just need you to be here when I wake up. She smiled. It was small but true. Then with a sense of ceremony that felt both absurd and sacred, they stood. Together they approached his ancient desktop terminal. The Form 117-C, Request for Recognition of Interspecies Domestic Partnership, waited silently in the drafts folder. Stephen glanced at her. Want to hit submit? But she raised one hand, stopping him. One last step, she said. If you accept me, as Denvari do, you must offer assent. Assent? She nodded. A personal item, something that carries your imprint. We mark our mates this way. He looked around, considering. Then quietly he removed his jacket, the worn brown one she'd once stitched after a food vendor tore it. He handed it to her. She buried her face in it, breathing deeply. When she looked up again, something reverent had settled in her expression. Now she nodded. Submit it. The soft click of the terminal wasn't dramatic. It didn't signal fireworks or fanfare. But as the approval message blinked into life, partnership request received, pending biometric confirmation, the room felt different. No, not different. Whole. They stood in silence, hands still joined, as the stars outside H91 wheeled slowly past the window, mute witnesses to the start of something neither of them had planned, but both had chosen. Stephen had never seen the observation dome so clean. They'd cleared it out the night before, moved the vending machines, silenced the faulty intercom speaker, even patched the cracked floor tiles that had annoyed him for 3 years. Now light from Pelion 4 bathed the interior in amber and gold, casting long, honey-colored shadows across the curved windows. The gas giant churned far below, its eternal storms turning like old gods in sleep. Around it, the station's metal arms held fast, humming quietly beneath his feet. And in the center of it all, wearing the soft indigo tones of a Denver ceremonial shawl, stood Sahari. Stephen's breath caught. She wasn't adorned in jewels or painted in gold. There were no flowers, no music beyond the gentle mechanical rhythm of the station, no guests besides a few persistent co-workers and a single shy medic from the D7 evac. And yet, she was luminous. Her black hair was braided back with small copper beads, each one bearing a symbol he couldn't read. But she told him they marked moments that changed her. The final bead sat just behind her ear. I carved this one yesterday, she told him that morning, fingertips brushing it with quiet pride. It means chosen without force. Stephen stood across from her, wearing his cleanest uniform, a plain, dark blue jacket he'd once saved for audits. His shoes didn't match, but his shoulders were straight. His chest was tight, but in a good way. A full, anchoring kind of tight. The station clerk officiating the ceremony cleared his throat, glancing between them. Under interstellar cohabitation protocol and Denvari Compact Accord, the station recognizes the mutual bond requested by Stephen Hale and Sahari Vell. Final declarations must be stated in the presence of a witness. The witness, a small round inspection drone with a recording light blinking red, hovered obligingly. Sahari spoke first. I declare not ownership, she said, voice steady, but alliance. I vow to listen before I speak, to act without expectation, to defend what we build together as if it were flesh. She turned to Stephen fully, palm extended. You gave me shelter when I was invisible. You gave me a future when my name had no weight. And now I ask not for loyalty, but for presence. Stay with me. That is all I ask. Stephen swallowed hard. He hadn't prepared a speech. She knew he wouldn't, but the words came anyway, quiet and uneven, shaped by honesty. I thought I came to H91 to hide, he said. But you walked back into my life and made it impossible to keep hiding. You taught me that survival isn't the same as living, that safety isn't just silence, and that keeping a promise can become the reason you find yourself again. He reached out, hand brushing hers. So here's mine. I promise to see you every day, not as obligation, but as choice. There were no rings. Instead, Sahari drew a small stylus from the folds of her shawl and touched it to Stephen's collar, inking a small, faint mark just behind his left ear, a Denvari bonding glyph. It would fade within weeks, but the meaning stayed. The clerk nodded, his expression unexpectedly gentle. By legal, cultural, and ethical codes recognized aboard the station, your bond is confirmed. May your alliance strengthen the station's harmony and each other's purpose. The drone chirped, logging the moment. And just like that, it was done. No fanfare, no music, just a silence that felt like peace. They stayed in the dome long after the others left. Stephen leaned against the glass, watching the slow spin of the station lights beyond. Beside him, Sahari stood quietly, arms crossed, head tilted toward the stars. "This isn't where I pictured getting married," he said finally. "It is better," she replied. He glanced over. "Yeah? There's no noise here," she said. "Only you. Only now." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Do you want to do anything to celebrate?" he asked. "A dinner? A dance?" She turned to him with that almost smile. "Yes, but first, tea, and a quiet evening. Together." They returned to their quarters. The cat lamp flickered to life. A warm stew simmered on the heater. Stephen opened the window shutter just a little so they could see the planet turning beneath them. Later, curled on their shared cot, Sahari lay with her head resting against his chest. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd be someone's husband." "You're not," she murmured. "You're my partner. Husband is a legal term." "Romantic. It's accurate." He laughed quietly, running his hand through her hair. The lights dimmed, casting the room in soft shadow. Outside the viewport, Pelion 4 turned in silence, its storm bands moving slowly beneath a curtain of distant stars. The cat lamp blinked once and settled into its gentle night glow. Inside, the air was still. Sahari's fingers traced a line along Stephen's arm as they lay together on the cot, her touch unhurried, exploratory. She'd grown familiar with the texture of his skin, the warmth, the softness under his shoulder, the place where a scar hid beneath the edge of his collar. But tonight, her touch lingered longer. Not out of hesitation, but something else. Curiosity, trust, want. Stephen turned toward her, his brow brushing hers. "Are you okay?" "I am," she whispered. "But I don't know how this begins." His hand moved to her cheek, brushing the braid that had loosened beside her face. "We don't have to begin anything. Not unless it feels right." She exhaled softly. "It feels like a threshold. I've stood at many, none like this." He didn't speak. Instead, he let his silence offer what words could not. Assurance. Sahari shifted forward, her forehead resting fully against his now. Her breath mingled with his, and for a moment there was only that. The rhythm of two people breathing together, finding sync in the quiet. Then slowly, deliberately, she brought her lips to his. It wasn't like the kiss from before. That one had been certainty wrapped in restraint. This one was hunger softened by reverence. Stephen answered her with equal care. His hand slid behind her waist, drawing her gently closer, and she followed willingly, curving into the space he offered. The line between them disappeared. She moved with purpose but also with wonder, like someone stepping into new gravity, testing the ground beneath her for the first time. Her body responded before her mind caught up, and as she climbed into his lap, straddling him in silence, Stephen's breath caught. Her eyes searched his face, not for permission, but for connection. "I've never given this before," she said, her voice low, vulnerable. "To anyone." He touched her cheek again, gentler than before. "Then let's not rush. Let's just stay here. Let it be what it is." But she shook her head barely. "I want to know what it means. Not as ritual, not as duty. I want to feel it. With you." Her first movements were uncertain, muscles taut, breath shallow. There was unfamiliarity in every inch of her skin, tension behind her graceful form. Stephen held her with both hands, keeping her steady, grounded, and she let him. The first true closeness brought a flash of pain, sharp, immediate, and utterly new. She tensed, her breath catching. Stephen stilled. "We stop, now." But she shook her head once, firm. "Number, I need to feel it change. I want to understand." He kissed her shoulder, slow, grounding, reverent. She closed her eyes. With every breath, the pain softened. The tightness became pressure. The pressure gave way to heat. Then, slowly, pleasure unfurled. Not all at once, not like some switch thrown, but like warmth seeping into cold limbs. Like wind slipping under a door you thought was sealed. She moved again, This time not with caution, but with intent. Her fingers gripped his arms, not out of fear, but because her body needed somewhere to anchor. And Stephen held her through all of it. Her breath turned uneven. Her head dropped to his shoulder. And when the first tremor of pleasure broke through her, it surprised her enough to gasp. He felt her change before she said anything. Her weight shifting, her tension giving way to rhythm, her movements no longer searching, but sure. It wasn't a performance. There were no practiced motions, no words rehearsed for effect. Just instinct, just want, just the electric sensation of discovery, of a first time that wasn't rushed or taken, but shared. And when her voice finally rose, not in words, but in sound, he felt her fingers clench behind his back, and his own body responded like it had been waiting its whole life for this moment. After she stayed there, curled over him, her chest against his, breath slowly sinking again. "I didn't know it could be like that," she whispered into the crook of his neck. Stephen ran his hand slowly down her spine. "Like what?" "Like trust. Like falling into someone and finding ground instead of air." He smiled softly. "That's the best kind." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "There is no ritual in Denvari culture for this kind of moment," she said. "But if there was, I think it would begin with two people breathing as one." He kissed her again, slower this time, softer. "Then let's keep breathing." They stayed there, skin against skin, hearts beating quietly beneath the weight of what they'd just become. Not just bonded by form or law or need, but by choice, again and again. And in the heart of a rusting orbital station above a storm-ravaged planet, two lives once interrupted had finally fully aligned. The gravity on H91 was just shy of standard Earth normal, a subtle difference that usually went unnoticed. But today, Sahari felt it. Every step through the medical corridor seemed a fraction heavier, every breath a little deeper, like her body knew something before her mind could name it. She sat in the sterile quiet of Medbay Level 3, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The medical assistant, a kindly old humanoid with translucent scales and too many blinking sensors for a face, had just finished running the scans. It hadn't spoken yet, but Sahari already knew. The quiet wasn't empty. It was expectant, alive. When the results flashed onto the wall screen in soft violet font, the translator pinged softly. "Pregnancy confirmed. Denvari human gestation hybrid. Viability, high, projected first trimester." For a long moment she stared. Her heart didn't race. It slowed, as if the universe itself had drawn a breath and was holding it. Her mind tried to catch up, replaying memories and flashes. Stephen's voice in the dark, the soft laughter between shared meals, the slow unspoken tether that had drawn them closer than proximity ever could. And now this. She left the med bay in a haze, not panicked, not elated, just full, full of something too large for words. Stephen was at their quarters, arms elbow deep in a crate of mismatched tools. He was muttering at the faulty nutrient dispenser, again. Why would a fluid regulator require a language input setting? Why would anyone... She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. He turned, wiping his hands on a rag, mouth already forming a question. But then he saw her face. Something in it stopped him cold. "Sahari?" he asked softly, stepping forward. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, just once. He crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face with calloused palms. "Tell me." She took his hand and placed it against her stomach. That was all. Stephen's breath caught, his eyes flickering between her face and where his hand now rested. "You're..." he began, but the words cracked midair. She nodded. A long silence passed, but it was golden, charged with too many things to name. Then Stephen laughed, a stunned, soft, unbelieving laugh. He kissed her, forehead, cheek, lips, and again, like he was anchoring himself to reality. "I don't know how to be a father," he murmured. "I don't know how to be a mother," she replied, voice trembling. "But we are not alone." His arms tightened around her, pulling her against him. Number were not. They spent that night side by side on the cot, awake more than asleep. She pressed his hand to her stomach again and again, as if afraid the truth might vanish if she didn't keep touching it. He didn't stop her. He couldn't. He was still relearning how to breathe. Outside, the orbital hub continued its endless rhythm. Cargo ships came and went. Permits were filed, rejected, and filed again. Lights flickered in the long corridors. The food vendor, 3 levels down, screamed about stolen peppers. The AI on level 9B glitched and sang old Terran wedding songs to confuse maintenance bots. Life on H91 went on, but within their shared quarters, bare, cluttered, and perfect, a different kind of life had just begun. In the days that followed, small changes came. Sahari began sleeping later, her body already shifting its rhythm. Stephen filed a Form 98J, requesting a shared quarters expansion under Class A medical exception. He wrote it in perfect compliance, then added a sticky note that read, "This is for her, and for someone new." They hung a string of low lights around the room, not for regulation, not for aesthetics, but for softness, for peace. One afternoon, she brought home a bundle of root vegetables and announced, "Our child will know both Denvari and Terran flavors." He kissed the back of her hand and said, "Then they'll be impossible to cook for." She smiled. "Good." The cat lamp remained on her side of the bed. It blinked every night, and every morning Stephen would watch her sleep just a little longer than necessary, awed by how ordinary the miracle had become. They didn't need ceremony. They didn't need tradition. They had each other, and a child not yet born, already loved. In a place built by bureaucracy, noise, and rust, 2 strangers had made something extraordinary, not just survival, not just comfort, but a future. And when people walked past Unit 14 FB on Central Block C, they sometimes paused. They didn't know why. Maybe it was the light, or the smell of root stew, or the faint sound of quiet laughter behind the door. But those who paid close attention might have felt it. Something growing, something human, something new. The kind of love that filled a hollow orbit with life.